By and large, we are creatures of habit. We like our routines, our schedules. For me, I go to school Monday through Friday and then straight to practice before heading home to start homework. Saturdays bring more homework time and going out with friends to eat or watch movies. And on Sundays, we spend the day with my grandmother and go to church. As stress over school or relationships builds, there's a level of comfort in knowing what tomorrow looks like. Right now, the safety of schedules has all been but ripped away from us, and almost overnight. Many of us are worried about our families, friends, work, education, and are overall struggling with a transition to a new normal. It can feel harder than ever to focus on church or your relationship with God when there's just so much else going on. In today's reading from Acts, Paul gives this great speech in front of the Areopagus, this giant rock protruding from the earth, almost like a small mountain. Paul reminds us that God lives in each one of us and is the creator of all things. He states that God does not live in shrines made by human hands, nor is an image formed by the art and imagination of mortals. I imagine this scene. Paul speaking to a crowd, this giant rock, a backdrop behind him, as he explains that the presence of God is not confined to church. Rather, God lives in each of us and through the earth itself. And I realized that the setting of Paul's speech was just as important as the words themselves. This giant rock, this Areopagus rising behind Paul, far larger than any man-made house of worship or individual, was evidence of exactly what Paul preached. To me, the Areopagus was a sign that God is greater than all things, He lives in all things, and not just beautiful churches. Through my time at St. Paul's, I've been blessed with many of my own Areopagus moments. I think of the pilgrimage to Dizay, France, and the view from the top of the Roche de Soudre. I think of Harlan trips, stopping for the annual picture on the gravel pit with a beautiful view of Appalachia, the waterfall we hiked to on July 4th, and the mountaintop owned by a quiet man named Bob, befriended by the past St. Paul's Harlan trips. Each one of these experiences has helped me grow in my relationship with God. I could feel His presence as I experienced the beauty of the world He created, much in the same way I imagine Paul and the Athenians did. It's easy to worship in a beautiful church and reduce the presence of God to an hour on Sundays. St. Paul's has challenged me to take my faith outside of my own routine of Sunday service, and I am so grateful for every experience this community has given me. In these stressful times, when we can't carry on with worship and church activities as usual, having faith and hope is more important than ever. I want to remind everyone that, as Paul explains in today's reading, we don't need to go to church to worship. Instead, learn to see God in nature and worship through the love of one another as we all carry God within us. While the rest of the world has come to a screeching halt on many fronts, God doesn't, our faith doesn't, and how we worship shouldn't either. Today, I ask that each of you look outside and find your own Areopagus, your Bob's Mountain, and be assured that God is very much present and with each one of you.
Hello, I'm Sophie LeMay, and I'm a senior this year. Since I was little, St. Paul's has been a wonderful, welcoming place for me, and I've grown up singing in the choirs and acolyting. I've listened to senior sermons over the past few years, and I've always wanted to do one, and though this is a little different than I'd imagined it, I'm still so excited to have the opportunity. If you know me, you may very well know that I love the saying, everything happens for a reason, and you're also probably sick of me talking about it. Well, buckle up. I don't know why, but it gives me comfort in almost any situation, from a terrible AP biology class to illness to random fights with friends. In our Zoom Bible study last week with Leah, I brought this idea up after reading the Acts passage from today, and she was very clearly alarmed. In her gentle way, she quickly explained to me how that mentality could often be interpreted as writing off someone else's pain, and she told me to be careful with it. So, I'm doing my entire sermon on it. I've run into this issue with my favorite saying many times before. It gives me so much comfort that I used to assume that it must do the same for other people, and boy was I wrong. I remember vividly sitting on a school bus with a friend a few years ago, and she was in a fight with another friend. I told her that it has a purpose and that she'll learn something from it, and she just about slapped me. She said, and I'm paraphrasing, "I don't care, I don't like it right now," which in hindsight was a great response. I brushed it off at the time and didn't take the clearly much needed self-reflection at that moment. As these things often do, it circled back into my life this year. I took an incredible psychology class where we, albeit very passionately at times, discussed everything from neurotransmitters to substance abuse to the death instinct. At the beginning of the second semester, we spent at least a month talking about the art of presence. It's a complicated term that can mean many different things, but our focus was on how to be present for the other people in your life as they go through difficult things. The punchline was that if your friend tells you her grandma died, not to say, "Oh, my dog died a few months ago, and it just takes time." The art of presence is something that most everyone needs practice with, and there's never a dedicated time in life to learn it. Another big punchline was not to say that someone's tragedy was God's plan, or, you guessed it, that everything happens for a reason. I was taken aback, and I finally, a few years too late, took the time to really think about that sort of response to tragedy and how it can feel to people. It brought up some pretty significant cognitive dissonance for me, which was another topic of the class that my psych teacher would be very proud of me for including. If it's so comforting to me, why can it be so hurtful to other people? And, that being said, can I still stand by that mentality like I have for so many years? Biblically, it comes up again and again, even just in our readings for today. Acts pretty centrally discusses the intentionality of God's creation and actions, and it can create a bit of a slippery slope. Needless to say, I've gotten a little extra practice in coping with less than ideal situations the past few months, as we all have. On the grand scheme of things, I'm immensely lucky. My family is not struggling for money, we have food, and we live in a cozy house. For those of us that fall into that category, this experience is more emotionally taxing. As seniors, we've lost all of our quintessential lasts. The last time sitting with our friends at lunch, the last time in our favorite class, the last time seeing our favorite teacher, the last choir concert, the last baseball game, the last time singing or acolyting at St. Paul's, and I could go on. It's far from ideal, but for some reason, I'm doing okay. I don't know why, and I don't think I'm necessarily doing a better job at handling this than the next guy. In fact, I think maybe I'm just ignoring the hard stuff. Throughout the spring, I've made a point of going on safe 6-foot-apart walks with my friends or having an outdoor sleepover in separate tents. It's keeping me sane. Somehow, I kept coming back to the idea that this is happening for a reason, and it's really the only way that I can justify it. I'm not trying to look on the bright side or paint a silver lining necessarily, because again, this isn't fun, but I feel like, for me, I'm making some sort of sense out of it all. When we get to go back to work, school, and even Target, it will be so full of joy, and I don't think that'll dissipate quickly. I'm biased, but the class of 2020 will go down in history. We'll have the best reunions of any class, and everyone will be that much more excited to go to college, whenever we get to do that. We're finally taking better care of our planet than we have in at least a century, and it was high time. However, all of that doesn't mean that right now doesn't really suck. Actually, we need to take the time to appreciate just how much it does. Yet, I'm still relentlessly trying to find a reason everything is a little bit less terrible than it is. I didn't necessarily expect to find help with that endeavor in my sermon prep, but of course I did. In the John reading for today, Jesus says, "I will not leave you orphaned, I am coming to you." We've got help all around us, and I think we're finally learning to use it and to lean on each other across a Zoom call more than ever. I won't say it's God's plan, because we've covered that, but I am convinced that it has a purpose.